Tonight you are going to do something genuinely reckless. You're going to lie down flat on your back in the dark. You're going to close your eyes. And then you are going to switch off your consciousness completely. No awareness, no vigilance, no ability to react, for somewhere around 8 hours. A third of your entire life spent helpless. You'll do it without a second thought because you have a locked door. Now take the door away, and the walls, and the roof. Take away the bed, the neighbors, the police, the streetlights, and every other thing standing between you and the outside world. Put yourself on open ground, in real darkness, in a landscape where large animals with excellent night vision are awake right now and looking for something soft to eat. And now go to sleep, deeply, for 8 hours, every single night, for your entire life, because that is what every one of your ancestors did, for hundreds of thousands of years. And here's the part that should genuinely bother you. The way humans sleep is objectively terrible for survival. Most animals that get eaten have solved this problem. They sleep in short bursts. They sleep standing up, ready to bolt. They sleep in trees. Some birds and marine mammals can shut down half their brain at a time, keeping one eye open, literally. Prey animals have evolved dozens of clever ways to rest without becoming completely defenseless. Humans did the opposite. We went all in on unconsciousness, deep, heavy, immobile sleep lying flat on the ground in one long block. That is, on paper, a suicidal strategy. So how do we get away with it? The answer is one of the most quietly brilliant things our species ever worked out. And part of it is happening in your own family, right now, and you've probably never noticed. First, why our sleep is so strange. Let's start with a genuinely surprising fact. Compared to our closest relatives, humans sleep less than we should. Other primates, the monkeys and apes we're related to, tend to sleep quite a lot. Depending on the species you're looking at, anywhere from around 9 hours up to 15 or more. And based on body size, brain size, diet, and all the usual patterns, a primate like us should be sleeping considerably longer than we do. We sleep about 7 hours. We're the short sleepers of the family. But, and this is the clever bit, our sleep is denser. A noticeably higher proportion of human sleep is REM sleep, the deep dreaming stage that seems to matter most for memory and for the brain's housekeeping. So we're not getting less sleep in the sense of being deprived, we're getting the same work done in less time. And there's a compelling explanation for why that might have happened, because sleeping was dangerous and the less time you spend doing it, the better. If lying unconscious on the ground is the riskiest part of your day, then evolution has a clear incentive to compress it. Get in, do the essential biological work as efficiently as possible, get out. Shorter nights, deeper sleep, fewer hours spent as an unattended meal. Which means the modern complaint that we don't get enough sleep may be looking at it backwards. We're not badly designed. We're ruthlessly optimized for a world where every hour asleep was an hour of exposure. But even 7 hours is a very long time to be unconscious in the open. Compressing it isn't enough on its own. You need something else. You need something awake. The 18 minutes. This is my favorite piece of research in this entire video. And once you know it, you'll see it in your own family. Researchers studying the Hadza, a community in Tanzania who still live largely by hunting and gathering, and whose sleeping arrangements are about as close as we can get to observing the deep human past, did something simple and clever. They fitted people with monitors that track when someone is asleep and when they're awake, and they recorded a group of adults continuously for around 20 days. Then they asked one question: how often was everybody asleep at the same time? Across the whole study period, hundreds of hours of night, the total amount of time when every single adult was simultaneously asleep came to about 18 minutes. 18 minutes. Out of the entire study. For essentially the whole of every night, somebody in that group was awake. Not on guard duty. Not on a rota. Nobody was assigned anything. It just happened. And when the researchers looked at why, the answer is the beautiful part. It's age. Older people in the group tended to go to sleep early and wake up early. Younger adults tended to stay up later and sleep in. And in between, various people woke briefly, shifted, checked things, dozed off again. Layer all those different natural rhythms on top of each other across a group spanning several decades of age, and the mathematical result is that the night is covered. There is almost never a moment when everyone is out. This is sometimes called the sentinel hypothesis. The idea that a group with varied sleep timing gets round-the-clock watchfulness for free, purely as a side effect of people being different ages. And now, the bit that I love. You have seen this. You live with it. The grandparent who's inexplicably awake at 5:30 in the morning pottering about, making tea, while everyone else is unconscious. The teenager who genuinely cannot fall asleep before 1 in the morning and would sleep until noon given the chance. We treat both of these as problems. Old people can't sleep properly. Teenagers are lazy. They're not problems. They're the two ends of a security system. That teenager staying up late is covering the first watch. That grandparent waking before dawn is covering the last one. Between them, the group is protected across the most dangerous hours, and nobody had to organize anything or stay awake against their will. It is an extraordinarily elegant solution, a night watch built out of nothing but the natural fact that people of different ages get sleepy at different times. Real quick, if you're finding this as fascinating as I do me one small favor and hit that subscribe button. This channel is all about the surprising truth of how our ancestors really lived, and there's a new story every week. That's it. Back to it. The wall made of light, age-staggered sleep gets you eyes. But eyes alone don't stop a determined predator. For that, our ancestors had something better. Fire draws a line that most animals will not cross. Large predators have a deep, hardwired wariness of it. Fire in nature means uncontrollable danger, and the sensible response is to leave. So a burning fire creates a circle, maybe 10 meters across, that functions as a wall you can see through, and that changed sleep completely. Inside the circle, the calculation flips. You're not a defenseless animal in the open anymore. You're inside a boundary that the things hunting you don't want to enter. But, and this is the part that gets skipped, a fire only works if it's burning, which means somebody has to feed it. Through the night, every night, forever. So now put the two ideas together and the picture becomes lovely. You don't need a designated guard staring into the dark. You need someone who happens to be awake anyway to put another log on. And thanks to age-staggered sleep, there is always someone awake anyway. The old man who's up at 4 adds wood. The young woman still awake at midnight adds wood. The system maintains itself. Sleep, fire, and family turn out to be one single interlocking mechanism. The cold will kill you before anything else. Now for the danger nobody thinks about. And honestly, it killed far more people than predators ever did. Here's something odd about your body. You are at your coldest when you're asleep. Your core temperature naturally dips during the night, bottoming out in the small hours before dawn. That's a normal part of your daily rhythm, and in a warm bedroom, it's completely harmless. Out in the open, in a cold climate, it's a serious problem. You are lying still, generating almost no heat through movement, on ground that is actively pulling warmth out of you. And your body is deliberately turning its own thermostat down at the same time. That's why people who die of exposure so often die at night, and why the hours before dawn are the deadliest. So through the ice ages, and through every ordinary winter before central heating, going to sleep was a genuine gamble with your own body temperature. And our ancestors solved it with 3 things. They slept in a heap. Not for affection, though it surely became that for heat. Bodies pressed together lose far less warmth than bodies apart. And a pile of people generates a shared pocket of warm air. Sleeping alone in a cold climate wasn't a luxury. It was a risk. This is why sleeping arrangements throughout most of history involved everyone in one space, often in one bed, and why the modern idea that each person needs their own room would have seemed both baffling and dangerous. They got off the ground. Bare earth is a heat thief. So people made bedding, and we have a genuinely remarkable example of this. At a rock shelter in South Africa, archaeologists found layers of compacted plant bedding preserved in the sediment, going back tens of thousands of years. People had cut sedges and grasses and laid them down to sleep on. And here's the detail that makes it extraordinary. Laid on top of that bedding were the leaves of a particular tree, a species whose leaves contain natural insect-repelling compounds. They weren't just making a mattress. They were making a mattress with built-in mosquito protection. Think about that level of knowledge. Somebody worked out, presumably over generations, that sleeping on these leaves meant fewer bites and fewer of the illnesses that come with them. That is a considered engineered bed, tens of thousands of years old, and they kept the fire close. Which brings the whole thing full circle. The fire that keeps predators out is the same fire that keeps you from freezing, tended by the same person who happened to be awake. We used to sleep in trees. There's one more piece, and it's the strangest. Our distant ancestors almost certainly slept in trees. Our closest living relatives still do. Chimpanzees and other great apes build a fresh nest of bent branches up in the canopy every single night, and they're genuinely good at it. It takes a few minutes and produces something surprisingly comfortable, and it makes complete sense. Get off the ground and you've removed yourself from almost every predator that matters. Most large hunters can't follow you up there, or can't get to you quietly enough to matter. So at some point in our history, our ancestors made a genuinely enormous decision. They came down. Sleeping on the ground is a huge shift, and it's tied to bodies that were becoming better at walking and worse at climbing. Once you've committed to the ground, you cannot easily go back up when things get frightening, which reframes everything else in this video. Coming down out of the trees created the problem, and fire, group living, and staggered sleep are the solutions we invented to make it survivable. We gave up the safest bedroom in nature and had to build a replacement out of technology and cooperation. That's a pretty good summary of our entire species, actually. What it actually felt like. Let's put you there for a second, because the texture of it matters. You're lying on plant bedding, not a mattress. The ground beneath is hard and slightly cold. You are pressed against other people, family, probably several of them, close enough to feel them breathing. There's a fire a few meters away throwing orange light and shifting shadows across everything. And somebody is sitting near it who isn't asleep yet. It's noisy. Not traffic noisy, but alive. Insects, wind, animals moving somewhere out there, the fire cracking. And it's dark in a way you have almost certainly never experienced. You're probably not sleeping in one solid block either. There's good historical evidence that before artificial light, people commonly slept in two phases. Down for a few hours, awake for a stretch in the middle of the night, then down again until dawn. That waking hour was normal and unremarkable. You'd lie there or talk quietly or think. And crucially, you are never alone. Not once, not in your entire life. The idea of going into a separate room, closing a door, and sleeping by yourself would have struck almost every human who ever lived as strange and rather sad, and quite possibly unsafe. Sleep is an act of trust. Here's the thought I keep coming back to. Falling asleep requires you to believe you are safe. That's not poetry. It's neurology. If your brain thinks there's a threat nearby, it will simply refuse to let you go under, or it'll keep you in light, broken, useless sleep. Anyone who's tried to sleep somewhere unfamiliar and unsettling knows this. You cannot force it. So for hundreds of thousands of years, the thing that let humans sleep was not a lock. It was other people. You went unconscious because you trusted the group, because someone was awake, because the fire was fed, because if something came out of the dark, 30 people would be up and shouting within seconds. Your safety was social, and so is your sleep. Now look at how we do it. We sleep alone, or in twos, in silence behind a locked door, in a room designed to be as dark and quiet and empty as possible. We've replaced the group with architecture, and we are, by most measures, some of the worst sleepers in human history. Insomnia is enormously common. Sleep problems are a genuine modern epidemic. We have the safest, most comfortable, most controlled sleeping conditions any humans have ever had. Perfect mattresses, climate control, locked doors, and an awful lot of us lie there wide awake at 2 in the morning with our hearts going. I don't think that's a coincidence, though I'd be careful about claiming to know the reason. There are plenty of modern culprits: screens, light at night, caffeine, stress, work that follows us home. But it's at least worth noticing that we removed the one ingredient that made sleep possible for our entire evolutionary history, being surrounded by people who had you covered, and replaced it with a door. So how did they sleep without being eaten? Let's answer it properly. They slept less and more efficiently because time unconscious was time exposed. They slept in a group, which meant that thanks to nothing more than people being different ages, somebody was awake for almost every minute of every night. They slept beside fire, which drew a line most predators wouldn't cross, and the fire stayed lit because the person who happened to be awake fed it. They slept in a heap, on engineered bedding, because the cold was as likely to kill them as anything with teeth, and they slept on the ground only because they'd already given up the trees and had built something better in its place. Not one of those solutions is a piece of technology in the way we'd think of it. They're all about arrangement. Who sleeps when? Who lies next to whom? Where the fire goes. It's a security system made of people. So tonight, when you go and lie down alone in a dark, quiet room and lose consciousness for 8 hours without a flicker of concern, recognize what an absolutely extraordinary luxury that is. Every human before very recently needed a whole group of people to make that possible. You've got a door. They had each other.